The last letter. The town of Seabrook was a quiet place, nestled between rolling hills and an endless stretch of ocean. The houses were old but sturdy, their wooden frames worn by the salty air. On the farthest edge of town, in a small white cottage with a blue door, lived an old man named Henry Whitmore. Every morning, without fail, Henry would sit by the window, a cup of tea in his hands, and watch the waves roll in. The tide would rise and fall, the seagulls would cry out as they circled above, and the world would go on as it always had. But Henry remained still, his mind lost in the past. On the small wooden table beside him lay a single envelope, yellowed with age. It had been sitting there for nearly 50 years, unopened. The ink had faded slightly, but the name on the front was still clear. Henry Whitmore. It was from Eleanor. Henry had met Eleanor when he was 23, just a young fisherman with big dreams and calloused hands. She had been the daughter of a bookstore owner, a woman with dark curls and eyes full of light. She had a way of making even the smallest things feel magical. The way she laughed when the tide soaked their shoes. The way she read poetry under the street lamps. The way she held his hand as if she never wanted to let go. They had spent 3 beautiful years together. They talked about marriage, about children, about growing old in their little town by the sea. But fate had other plans. One day, Eleanor left. It was sudden, without warning. One evening, they had watched the sunset together, her fingers intertwined with his, and the next morning, she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, only the letter in his mailbox. Henry had never opened it. He had been too afraid, afraid of what it might say, afraid that the woman he had loved, more than anything, had chosen a life without him. He had convinced himself that it was better not to know, that some things were easier left unanswered. But the years passed, and the loneliness grew heavier. His friends married, had children, and grew old with the people they loved. But Henry remained alone, and now, at 82 years old, he was tired of wondering. With trembling hands, he picked up the envelope. The paper was brittle beneath his fingers as he carefully tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting familiar yet distant. He took a deep breath and began to read. My dearest Henry, if you are reading this, it means you are finally ready to know the truth. I never wanted to leave you. I never wanted to break your heart, but I had no choice. I was sick. Henry. The doctors told me I had little time left, that the illness in my body would take me away sooner than I had ever imagined. I didn't want you to watch me wither, to see me in pain. I couldn't bear to see the sadness in your eyes, knowing you would try to stay strong for me. So I left. I thought that if I disappeared, you would be free to move on, that you would find someone else, someone who could give you the life I never could. But as I write this, I realize I may have been wrong. Love doesn't disappear just because we leave. I only hope you found happiness in some way. But know this, Henry, no matter where I was, no matter how many years passed, my heart never stopped belonging to you. I loved you then. I love you still. And I always will. Yours forever, Eleanor. The letter slipped from Henry's hands, landing softly in his lap. His chest ached, not just with sorrow, but with the weight of all the lost years. 50 years. 50 years spent in silence, in loneliness, in wondering, and all along, she had loved him. He closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him like the tide. Their laughter on the beach, her hands in his, the way she had looked at him, as if he were her whole world. He had spent a lifetime missing her, and now he finally understood. That night, Henry placed the letter on his bedside table. The house was quiet, the moon casting a silver glow over the worn wooden floors. As he lay down, A peaceful smile crossed his lips. The ocean whispered outside, its waves carrying a distant echo of Eleanor's love. And for the first time in 50 years, Henry did not feel alone. When the sun rose the next morning, the waves still rolled in and out. The seagulls still cried out over the shore, but Henry's chair by the window sat empty.